Story 1. Ich bin wirklich schlecht darin, andere Sprachen zu lernen. Ich hatte ein Jahr Unterricht in der High School, habe auf eigene Faust gelernt und eine Zeit lang in Deutschland gelebt. Seit meiner Rückkehr in die Vereinigten Staaten habe ich weiter geübt, aber ich bin immer noch nicht besonders gut. Trotzdem möchte ich eines Tages wieder dorthin ziehen, und es wäre schön, die Sprache zu beherrschen. Story 2. Swedish and Norwegian. I am Danish and want to collect all three of our languages. Story 3. I moved here recently and I am trying to learn Welsh, but oh my word, I am struggling with how fast people speak. I think I need to pay for Disco Simrig and go on an intensive course or something. I learned Spanish to a pretty good level without much trouble, so maybe I am just getting old. Story 4. I am Irish and I am ashamed that I cannot speak Irish, but I am also too lazy to learn it. After that, probably Spanish. Story 5. The more I learn about English, the less I understand. Story 6. I would like to speak German fluently. There are many places I would like to visit where this language is spoken. Story 7. Italian because it's beautiful. Russian because my husband's family would be much more fun if I could actually talk to them. Story 8. I can speak French somewhat, but I am not improving. It would be really beneficial because my boyfriend is half French and it would also be useful for my future career. Story 9. It is my husband's and now my daughter's primary language, and it is awful to learn. Not going to lie. Story 10. Punjabi is soon to become the third official language in my country. Story 11. I want to learn Japanese, not just for anime and games, but to converse with my half-Japanese girlfriend and her family, who are all fluent. Story 12. I am part Maori and would like to feel more connected to my culture. Story 13. Я бы просто использовал это, чтобы ругаться на уроке, и никто не смог бы меня понять. Story 14. I am almost fluent in Spanish, my second language, and I have been learning Russian, so I would say that. Story 15. Моя приемная семья за Украине. Вони постійно ображали мене і кратко сміялися з іншого кінця кімнаті. Гадаю, мені вдалося зрозуміти одне ЗСЛВ, яке вживала моя зведена сестра. Вона називала матер-павю принаймні двічі на день, якщо я правильно зрозумів. Story 16. Ich habe es als Kind nicht gelernt und bin verärgert, dass ich so hart davor arbeiten muss. Ich spreche fließend Spanisch, und Englisch war sehr einfach zu lernen. Deutsch ist wirklich schwer. Story 17. I would love to learn German. I think it is an excellent language. I already speak English and Macedonian, so German would be quite different. I know basic phrases, but being able to travel to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland and speak German fluently with locals would be great. Story 18. Kutangwa. I speak only about 100 words and would like to become fluent to communicate with the world's largest native language community. Story 19. So then I could say, could I have some water, please? Story 20. One of my cats is not feeling well. I wish I could ask him what is bothering him. Story 21. I know there is no speaking involved, but I would love to be fluent in American Sign Language. Working in retail, you meet more deaf and hard of hearing people than you would think. There are 2 deaf people in my family. I know some sign language, but I am nowhere near fluent. Alternatively, I could learn Spanish. Where I live, more than half the people know Spanish or speak it as their only language. Story 22. Nahuatl sounds so interesting and is the language of my ancestors. Story 23. I am Welsh myself and studied the language intensively for over a year with Disco Simru. I was able to hold conversations with fluent speakers, but it has been over a year now and I can feel my skills leaving me. Story 24. Japanese so that I can watch anime without using my Sharingan. Story 25. The language of love. Cantonese. One of my best friends is from Hong Kong, and I have visited a couple of times and loved it. I do not think I could live there. Big city life is not something I want to deal with day to day. I have been trying to learn the language for years and have only learned a few basic phrases. Story 26. I want to learn Korean so I can watch Korean dramas and Korean pop content without subtitles. Story 27. Not just one, though. Spanish, because historical records from the 1600s to the 1800s in my country were written in Spanish. Koine Greek, Arabic, and Hebrew for religious scriptures and possibly for international relations. Irish for no particular reason. Story 28. I hate Spanish class and I just can't get it. Being good at it would save me some trouble, and I'd also get to say I'm trilingual, so that's cool. Story 29. Estonian sounds so incredible, like the language of some very old forest people or even elves. Story 30. German. It's been over 10 years since I've been trying on and off, and it's extremely frustrating. Story 31. French, because I have been trying my hardest for over 5 years and it just does not stick for some reason. Story 32. I know this is a cop-out answer on my part, but it is the truth. I've always wanted to know every language. I'm not a linguist. However, I wish I were. Story 33. I like Japanese a lot. I hope to someday become fluent in it. Currently, I only know the basics. Story 34. I speak German so I can find a nice job in Switzerland or Germany. Story 35. Greek. My wife's family speaks it, and it just sounds so beautiful. Story 36. I wish that, as a Canadian, I were fluently bilingual. I believe my life would be richer, not just from an employment perspective but also by being able to more fully appreciate this country's heritage. Story 37. Hungarian, because I am learning it and it is very hard. Spanish would be nice too because I would have constant opportunities to use it. Story 38. Mandarin, because it would open up a whole world of culture and business. Story 39. Spanish. I know a lot already and can read and speak it, but I am not fluent. My first language is English. I am specifically referring to Mexican Spanish, and I live around many people who know it, which makes it a little easier. Story 40. Chinese. I love the poetic sound of it. Or French, just so I can curse. Story 41. Portuguese, then emigrate to Madeira and just go hiking. Story 42. French. Half of my country speaks it, and I can barely make a few sentences. Story 43. I can learn Mandarin on my own, but I wish I could magically become fluent in Cantonese. Story 44. Most of my relatives are completely fluent in Spanish and English, but some do not speak English at all. I can understand what they are saying about 75% of the time, but I cannot reply. Story 45. Baby talk might make the really late nights a little shorter, and I could make a killing translating for anxious new parents. Story 46. Russian. I really want to understand Dostoevsky's books and Tarkovsky's films. Story 47. All of them, but the first would be Russian. Know thy enemy. Story 48. There are 3 in order of preference: Sanskrit, Latin, and Ancient Greek. Story 49. Learn Spanish because you will then have access to many countries. Story 50. Recuerdo algo, pero no podía formar una frase ni aunque mi vida dependiera de ello. Je me souviens de quelque chose, mais je n'arrivais pas à former une phrase, même si ma vie en dépendait. Story 51. My wife and her family are South Asian, so everyone is fluent in Urdu. Story 52. There are many. The languages I really want are Danish and Russian. I would also love to learn French, Italian, and Spanish. Probably will not happen, but the desire is there. I am also improving my English for work. Story 53. I am learning Swedish because my husband is from Sweden. I know many words, but putting them into sentences is the problem. Story 54. I work in healthcare in Minneapolis. Being able to speak Somali would be tremendously helpful. Story 55. Arabic is such a beautiful language. Gaelic, both Irish and Scottish, is also beautiful. Story 56. I once read that Old Norse was the language of the Old West. By old, he meant the 1200s, and by West, he meant Western Scandinavia. I pictured Viking gunslingers in big Stetsons. That would be my choice. Story 57. Spanish. It is prevalent in the United States and helps tremendously when working in Hispanic communities. Italian. I am Italian. I took Italian and failed because I did not try, and it has always bothered me that I never took it seriously. Story 58. I am functional but not fluent in French. It would be very helpful for me in my part of the country to have native-level French proficiency. Story 59. Bir gün Türkiye'yi ziyaret edip antik yerleri görmek istiyorum. Story 60. Low intent. Use Duolingo durante unos 3 meses, pero realmente no pasé de lo más básico. El español es hermoso. Story 61. Actually, I am starting to learn Norwegian in a few weeks. I am not sure how useful it will be, but I have always loved Norway, so it is a good choice for a potential side hustle. Story 62. Ich spreche bereits Englisch, und mit meinen Grundkenntnissen in Französisch kann ich mich einigermaßen in Spanisch und Italienisch zurechtfinden. Aber Deutsch zu lernen würde mir Zugang zu einer der größten Volkswirtschaften Europas verschaffen. Story 63. Japanese. I think it sounds beautiful, and I am a huge fan of Japanese culture. Story 64. Amo il suono vivace e ritmico della lingua italiana. Story 65. I work in Denmark but remotely from the United Kingdom. I am Norwegian. Story 66. I live in Texas. Half the people there speak Spanish and I do not, so I feel like a dunce. Story 67. I live in New York City and have a lot of contact with Hispanic people. Speaking Spanish would enhance my interactions with them. Story 68. Spanish. To make my Spanish-speaking colleagues feel more welcome in an unwelcome world. I am in the early stages of learning, so it may take a while. Story 69. I know some Thai, but being conversational would be fantastic. Story 70. Japanese is difficult to learn but interesting and cool. Story 71. Japanese. Yes, I am a fat weeb and I know it. I just think it would be nice to appreciate the language of the content I consume often. Story 72. Mandarin. To communicate with about 1,100,000,000 people and to read one of the world's most ancient languages. I took a year in high school and learned a bit on my own, and I found it easy to make progress. I also love the culture. Story 73, of course. Speaking Mandarin well opens many career opportunities. Story 74. I learned to accept that I would rather speak 2 languages as well as I can than learn another. Languages are fascinating, but I think 2 is my limit. Story 75. I would love to speak Japanese like a native speaker because it is such a complex language. Story 76. I am learning Korean so I can turn off subtitles on all these Korean dramas I am binging. Story 77. Hokkien or Cantonese, so I can understand what my relatives are saying. Story 78. American Sign Language and then maybe Spanish because of where I live. Story 79. Russian or Ukrainian. I work with a couple of people from both countries. A few of them are still learning English, and it would be nice to speak their language so I could help them when they need it. Story 80. Dutch. I know it is easy to learn, and I am currently trying to learn it. It sounds like a made-up language that some German children with limited knowledge of English would invent. Laughing out loud. Story 81. J'ai suivi des cours de français pendant des années, à l'école et en dehors, mais je n'ai jamais eu l'occasion d'être complètement immergé ni de pratiquer, donc j'ai encore des difficultés. Mon vocabulaire est bon, mais il m'est difficile de tout mettre en pratique. Story 82. I understand English well and write it fairly well, but I sound like a 5-year-old when I speak it. Story 83. Gott sei Dank habe ich Englisch gelernt. Deshalb möchte ich jetzt Deutsch lernen. Story 84. Vivo en Texas. Sería de gran ayuda. Mi cerebro no procesa el lenguaje. Apenas tengo dominio del inglés. Story 85. Lapsistani rakkain tämä näyttämö on. Missä kuutamo kuillaan kulkee. Story 86. Spanish or Japanese would each make parts of my life easier. Laughing out loud. Story 87. I am learning Japanese, but I am progressing slowly. I am using Busu and already know a lot. Story 88. テキストが見当たりません。編集したい日本語の本文をここに貼ってください。確認したい点、省略か。頭文字語、略語を展開して全文にするか読みを括弧でつけるか。句読点を和文に統一してよいか。数字や英字はそのままにするか。漢数字や仮名表記に変換するか。貼っていただければ、スペル、誤字、修正、略語展開、無意味な重複削除、句読点調整、特殊文字、リンク除去を行い、 Azure テキストトゥースピーチ向けに整えた本文のみを出力します。Story 89. Russian and German are two of the most interesting societies, each with a rich history and an amazing language. Story 90. French, because I am Canadian and that would be an asset for obtaining certain contracts and jobs. I understand and can speak and write some French, but it is not at a professional level of competency. Story 91. Hawaiian because I grew up there and I want more of that language in the world. Spanish because I can read, write, and speak at about a grade school level and I would love to improve so I can write more songs and poetry in Spanish. Story 92. I want to learn Spanish so I can communicate with coworkers more effectively, travel to South America, and speak with almost anyone. Story 93. Klingon. It would be fun to learn just to insult folks. Story 94. I have always thought it would be awesome to speak Japanese. Imagine all the anime and ramen menus you could fully understand. What language would you pick if you could instantly be fluent? Story 95. I learned Arabic and spoke it as a child, but I am slowly forgetting how to speak it fluently. Story 96. My French is very good. I am not yet fluent and still have a fairly strong American accent. Je fais de mon mieux. Story 97. Один из моих коллег научил меня минимальному набору фраз, которые я могу использовать на работе с русскоговорящими клиентами. Я очень хочу свободно говорить по-русски, а Duolingo просто отстой. Story 98. Chinese allows you to understand an incredible amount of content that cannot be accurately translated into other languages. However, my chances are very low. Story 99. Mandarin Chinese and German. I have been ripping my hair out trying to learn them. Story 100. Korean so I do not have to use subtitles or watch dubbed versions to enjoy original anime. Story 101. Lumipat kami sa Estados Unidos noong isang taong gulang pa lang ako. Gusto ng mga magulang ko na tuluyang makisama kami ng kuya ko, na 11 taon ang pagitan namin. Bihasa siya sa parehong wika, pero kalaunan ay halos hindi na niya alam magsalita ng Tagalog. Nag-retire siya at bumalik sa Pilipinas ilang taon na ang nakalipas at muling natutunan ang Tagalog, pero may Amerikano siyang pagbigkas. Naintindihan ko ng lubusan ang Tagalog, pero nahihirapan akong bumuo ng mga pangungusap na tama ang gramatika. Ang aming nakababatang kapatid ay ipinanganak dito at hindi niya naunawaan ang Tagalog. Story 102. I am learning 4 languages, so one of them is Spanish, mostly. Laughing out loud. Story 103. I speak broken English. I would like to improve, but I have no meaningful way to do so. Story 104. I am trilingual, borderline sextilingual or hexalingual. I wish I were fully fluent in Arabic and in either Japanese or Korean, but it is more of a casual interest than a genuine one. Story 105. He aprendido bastante por osmosis. Puedo comprender alguna frase hablada suelta, y si la leo, captar rápidamente de qué se trata, pero no sé hablar el idioma en absoluto. Creo que si comenzara a aprenderlo en serio no me llevaría mucho llegar al punto en que al menos pudiera hacerme entender, pero no hay suficientes horas en el día. El mandarín, el árabe, el japonés y el ruso también serían útiles. Posiblemente el coreano por motivos de cultura pop. Story 106. Italian. I am Latino and there are similarities for sure, but I would love to be completely fluent in Italian. It is such an awesome language to learn. Story 107. Я хотел бы связаться со своими дальними центральноазиатскими братьями, которые все говорят по-русски. Story 108. I love the German language, the people, and the culture, but I could never live there without speaking German. Story 109. I study Japanese because many games and other media are still not translated into English. Story 110. Euskara, also known as Basque and Somali. I know the original question asked for one language, but if I could split my study 50-50 to reach conversational, though not fluent, proficiency in both, that would be perfect. Story 111. 私は長年アニメやオタク文化に興味がありますが、日本語の習得がとても遅く、このまま本当にわかるようになるのか不安です。Story 112. Icelandic. I already speak Swedish fluently, and I think it would be really cool to be able to speak more like the Vikings did. Story 113. Corporate management bollocks. The language makes it sound like you have achieved a lot without actually making any valuable progress toward fixing the problem. I can manage a sentence or two, but beyond that I am either in a give it to me, I will deal with it mode, or in a go away, this is not something I can help with mode. I am envious of people who can attend these meetings, talk a good game, and yet actually do or know nothing. ストーリー114。その国へ旅行するなら、現地の言葉が話せればもっと安心していけるのに、学ぼうとする試みはすべて壁にぶつかりました。Story 115. French, so I can choose to refuse to speak it instead of being unable to. ストーリー116。この10年が終わる前にぜひ行きたいのですが、語学アプリではうまく学べません。教えてくれる人を見つけるのはさらに難しいです。Story 117. Spanish again. I was fluent and even studied in Costa Rica. Because I used it so little, I have shamefully forgotten so much. I would also like to learn Arabic and Mandarin. All three languages are frequently needed in my field, and I genuinely feel useless. Story 118. I wouldn't be able to pick one, but it would be one of these: Mandarin, Korean, Spanish, or American Sign Language. Story 119. I speak Spanish conversationally, but I must use extra mental effort to translate what I hear into English and then render my thoughts back into Spanish before communicating. I get cognitive burnout from that, and it would be nice to converse without such effort. Story 120. Estudié español 4 años en la secundaria y solo sé quizá 3 o 4 cosas. Simplemente no tengo el don para los idiomas. Story 121. I've always been interested in Latin, but I don't know why. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.